Welcome to Education Matters, the video magazine of the Association of School Business Officials of New York, or ASBO New York. This program covers issues impacting public education across New York State. I'm Mike Borges, Executive Director of ASBO New York, the organization representing over 2,000 members that work in the business offices of school districts and BOCES all over the state. School business officials are the education CFOs, the chief financial officers of school districts and BOCES. They are responsible for developing budgets, financing capital projects, payroll, developing long-range plans, and overseeing facilities, transportation, and food service departments. Our video magazine, Education Matters, will inform the public, education stakeholders, and public policymakers about the many roles of the school business official and the varied issues they deal with on a daily basis. In many ways, the most essential function of the school business official is to prepare the annual school budget for voter approval. Adam Hotaling and Timothy Hilker are here today to discuss putting together a school district budget. Adam is the Assistant Superintendent for Business at the Enlarged City School District of Troy. Previous to working at Troy, Adam provided guidance to business officials around the state as the state aid specialist for Questar 3 BOCES. Tim is the Assistant Superintendent for Business of Saratoga Springs City School District. Prior to his current role, he served as school business administrator for Galway Central School District. So who's involved in developing the budget?
Well, I'd say the business official is the primary person responsible for developing the budget, but it's really a relationship with everyone in the district, right from the superintendent on down. All of our directors and administrators are involved at a very high level. Our curriculum leaders are involved, and then of course the Board of Education.
Yeah, I would just add on to that, most all of our stakeholders at some point get an opportunity, whether they're in a building or a department. That's kind of a year-round input that we get. And then as budget season starts to take shape, a lot of the parents and staff and families from the community have an opportunity then to weigh in on what some of the budget proposals are.
So you mentioned the budget season. So when does the budget season start? When do you actually start working on putting in the numbers and developing a budget?
I'd say the new budget season begins right after the end of the last budget season. We're multi-year, we have multi-year planning, and we go from one season right into the next. As information becomes available for your future budgets, that's all a part of the plan. We continue to work with the administrators and input the budget during the fall for an adoption in the spring.
I would agree that it's a year-round process and that we start some aspects immediately after the budget passes, but for us it really gets underway in the fall when our goals and our targets are set for the year so that we can really drive our decision-making toward those goals. And so then obviously as we get into wintertime, those budget requests are distilled and brought up to district level for consideration and presentation to the board.
Yes, so having come from Galway, which is a more rural school district, to a more suburban urban school district in Saratoga, is there major differences between the two districts' budget process?
The processes themselves are very similar to scale, obviously. I would say that there are a lot more layers of approval because of the infrastructure in a larger district. In the smaller district, some of the decision-making becomes a little more centralized. So some of the issues, though, have some distinct characteristics based on the strategic plans, some geographical locations, and some of the priorities of the community.
So talking about the community, how do you, Adam, involve the community in your budget process, and then Tim could follow up on that?
Well, I think involving the community is changing all the time. I feel like no one really wants to spend nights at meetings in person, so I believe a lot of the communication has gone to the social media platform, whether via our website or through Facebook, and that's really kind of an evolving process and how to reach more people. The days where a lot of people come to meetings is usually if there's a controversial issue. If the budget is going along all right, usually the communications are through social media and website.
Tim?
Yeah, and we employ a lot of the same conventional means. One of the things that we do is the superintendent and I and the other assistant superintendents, we actually have what you might describe as a campaign schedule where we go out and we make sure we hit all of the PTA, PTSO meetings, We're in the departments in all the various buildings, delivering the message about the budget to at least get the word out there.
So here we are, almost maybe a month away from the budget votes on Tuesday, May 17th. What milestones, what activity remains to be done in putting the budget together and presenting it to the voters in next month?
Our budget has been approved by the board. So really those next steps are what Tim had talked about, getting out into the community and face-to-face, educating those that haven't had the opportunity to hear about the budget, and really provide them with more information in terms of program in the future.
Yeah, and the same is true for us. The budget has already been adopted by the board, and so it's just marketing it now, and then the vote obviously on May 17th.
Now you talk about marketing. School districts are somewhat limited by law as to what they can do in terms of promoting their budgets. What sort of the vehicles that you use? You said social media, you use newsletters, anything else that you do to sort of educate the voters about the importance of voting for the budget?
Well, we can't tell them to vote one way or the other.
Right.
But we really want an educated voter, voting on the school district program and budget as a whole. So really it's on us to get it out there. Like I said previously, social media is the best avenue to really reach as many people as possible. When we go to a PTO meeting, and there's only going to be so many people there, whether it's 20, 40, or 50. So really just a multifaceted approach to reach as many people as possible and answer those questions as best we can.
So in your district, what sort of budget issues are you confronting? Do you have an abundance or an adequate amount of funding? Are you going to be laying off people, hiring people? Where are you in the budget?
Well, with the restoration of the gap elimination adjustment, which was a reduction to our state aid, that was fully restored, and the decline in the pension contributions, we were in the fortunate position of being able to focus on restoring things that have been lost over the last several years and adding some things, making sure that we can sustain the programs that we have going forward. So, I don't suspect a lot of districts are finding themselves in that situation, but we're fortunate now.
So when the state budget gets adopted and you know your school aid numbers, how does that impact your budget development process?
Well, for us, it really speeds things up. We go through the January through March months really trying to establish what some assumptions are going to be about our revenue budget, as well as our expenditure budget, and kind of filtering the budget proposals that are put forth. So that's usually kind of the linchpin of the budget process, and we finalize our revenue budget. But with only typically having 2 board meetings scheduled between the time the state budget comes in and when we're required to adopt a budget, it becomes very difficult because one of those meetings the board has to adopt the budget and the property tax report card. So many of the decisions have to have already been made. So in many cases that only leaves 1 meeting. And as long as there isn't a gap to fill or any major decisions to be made, that can usually be accomplished, but it's still a compressed timeline.
Once the state budget comes out, we really go into high gear. A lot of times we have to come up with contingency plans beforehand because we just don't know where those numbers are going to end up. So while our expense side is somewhat known at the time, we really have to come up with multiple levels of possible cuts or additions. So once that state budget comes out, it gives us 2, maybe 3 weeks to make those final decisions and adopt a budget, which is a very short window.
So given the short time frame, if you had to change the whole budget process from the get-go, wave your magic wand, what would you do to change the budget process to make it easier and more efficient?
I think if there was a more steady formula for state aid, we might be able to forecast with some predictability what our state aid numbers were going to end up looking like. That hasn't been the case in the last few years, and so we're really kind of hanging on until that April 1st deadline to get those figures.
Right, we need either more time or more predictability. Those are the 2 things that would really help us, but our fiscal year is pretty much set.
Right.
So really the predictability would be best.
And what sort of increase did you get in your school aid?
Total state aid was about $2.9 million.
Increase?
Yeah.
And yours?
Our total increase?
Yeah.
was about $1.5 million.
And where are you in terms of, you know, you restoring programs?
Really, we're maintaining our programs at this point in time. There's a lot of complexities that go into state aid, one of which for us is charter schools. So while we gained some aid on one hand, we lost some on another hand in terms of charter reimbursements.
So when you worked at state aid planning at Questar 3 BOCES, what sort of typical questions did you get from business officials in the field?
By far, the most common question was in terms of the tax cap. While in theory it is a simple formula, I think we all know on the business official side that it's really not. It's very complex. Even the most seasoned business officials would call on a year-to-year basis because things change. There are certain exclusions that are very difficult to understand, both for the business official and even more so, I'd say, for the general public.
Talking about the tax cap, what sort of tax cap did you have, and how does that affect your budget process? And going forward, how is that going to affect your long-range fiscal planning?
We had a tax cap of about 0.9%. We wound up at about 0.79% increase. And in terms of going forward, we're really keeping our eye on that and hoping that some changes come to that formula. And equally important that they'll stop marketing a 2% tax cap because it's not that, rarely ever. But again, keeping our eye on foundation aid and what's going on with the tax cap formula. I think we're in a position to be able to sustain, but I think this year was unique in our ability to add program. I don't see that happening in the near future unless there are some drastic changes to one or both of those.
And your tax cap?
Our tax cap this year was 0.13, just above the CPI increase, the Consumer Price Index.
Very meager indeed.
Very meager. Keep in mind that we rely very heavily on state aid.
Right.
About 60% of our budget is funded through state aid. So, much like Tim, we would, like to increase our revenues as best as we can to fulfill our mission. And really, 0.13 is not going to do it. We decided locally to really just go to a 0 because 0.13 just didn't raise enough to even put forth to the voters.
So when your budget goes to the voters and your budget goes to the voters, do you anticipate any pushback, or do you think that because you're under your caps that there'll be definitely an approval process?
I don't foresee any problems with ours. The community in Saratoga has always been very supportive of the budget and the other propositions that have been put forth. So we're not expecting anything dramatic this year either.
Well, we have a 0% tax levy increase.
That's a good marketing ploy.
That is
Vote for 0.
A good number to put out. You never know, but we anticipate hopefully that the budget is supported, and that we feel that we've done a very good job putting a budget together that maintains our programs and really helps the student.
Well, thank you both for being on the show, and we appreciate you traveling to get here. Thank you very much.